is going on, guys? We are here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona to test out the all-new Polaris Slingshot. Now, some of you might remember my incredible trip to Maui, where I took a Slingshot all around the island, and I couldn't think of a better vehicle to explore the smells, the sights, the sounds of that incredible place. Now, this is the next generation of Polaris Slingshot, the 2020. The crazy part is the original car that came out 5 years ago at this point was actually developed by Polaris engineers inside of a garage, tinkering around, trying to figure out something fun and unique and different. And this is what they've come up with. Now, we've got the 2020 car that they've been developing for the last 4 years, and it's a heck of a lot more refined than the old one. Let's check it out. Of course, for those of you unfamiliar with the Slingshot, the first thing you're going to notice is it has 3 wheels. That's right, it's not a car, it's not a motorcycle, it's actually classified as an autocycle, which means something very cool. Autocycles have less stringent regulations than normal cars, which means this is able to be cheaper for you and me and lighter. How light? 1,750 pounds. That's half the weight of a BMW M3, 700 pounds less than a Miata. It's actually kind of quick. Check out the front. So what's new? Well, for one, we've got a more aggressive front fascia. Little bits and pieces have been tweaked. One, for improved aerodynamics. This stuff actually cools the engine as well as the occupants. But two, it makes the car look lower and more aggressive. It's not to say the old car was ugly, but I think they nailed the design a lot better in this case, considering their original design inspiration apparently was raptors, serpents, and snakes. We've also got these crazy redesigned headlights that are in this X shape. Kind of looks like a Star Wars X-Fighter. I kind of feel like in the future we're gonna see some auto manufacturers copying this. But the biggest thing is there's an all-new motor and transmission. No longer do we have a GM source engine. Polaris made their own. It's called a ProStar 2-liter 4-cylinder, and it makes 30 horsepower more in the R-Spec than the previous generation for a total of 203 horsepower. The engine itself weighs 60 pounds less than the previous generation. It revs all the way up to 8,500 RPMs. Yes, like a supercar, and it's able to do 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. The biggest updates with the new generation Polaris have to do with the interior and the transmission. For the first time ever, Polaris is offering the Slingshot with an automated manual, meaning if you don't want to drive a manual or you don't know how to drive a manual, you can finally own a Polaris. Now, my personal opinion is this car is more fun with a manual transmission, but if you don't want a manual, now you've got an awesome alternative. Taking a look in the interior, you can see the new auto drive transmission controls for reverse, neutral, and drive. Interestingly enough, there are no paddle shifters, which I would have liked to have seen, but you can of course get the full manual. But the entire interior has gone from the last generation bare bones off-road-esque vibe to something that actually looks like a nice place to be in. We've got these nice looking new designed seats, but in particular, the new steering wheel and display are so much better than before. Speaking of the screen, let's check this out. Go ahead and fire up the touchscreen. Look at those graphics, that's awesome. Check this out, we can scroll through the screen modes from the steering wheel itself, or you can just touch on the screen. It's actually really, really responsive. The colors are great, and the angle of the screen is much better from before so that there's no glare in the sunlight. One of the best parts about the new interior is something that no auto manufacturer takes into account when designing their interiors, and that is you need a decent place for your phone. We didn't have this in the old generation Slingshot. Now, finally, they have designed a space that's meant to fit a new iPhone Max, so the biggest one, in an OtterBox case, the bulkiest case available, and it fits your phone absolutely perfectly, and there's even some USB ports up here. Thank you, Polaris. I'd say that's enough talking and sitting. Let's take this for a spin, shall we? Guys, we are at beautiful Tortilla Flats in the 2020 Slingshot. And this thing is honestly awesome. Holy crap, it's easy to slide. So obviously the big new thing is the auto drive transmission. And while I've said I'd rather have the manual, it does open up a huge new market share of people who can enjoy the Slingshot. Now, when I went to Maui and experienced that place for the first time, it was so cool being in an open cockpit environment, just like I am right now in this beautiful place, being able to smell and see the scenery and feel like you're actually a part of it, like you're driving in it instead of just driving through it. And this vehicle gives you an experience that honestly nothing else other than a motorcycle, and motorcycles are obviously more dangerous than a Slingshot, can actually provide. Now, what is it actually like to drive? Well, the auto drive transmission, super easy to use, doesn't take any effort, and honestly, your grandma could drive this car. It shifts a little bit slower than I'd like, and I do wish it had paddle shifters, but of course you can fix that with just getting a manual transmission, so not a big deal whatsoever. Honestly, it accelerates pretty dang fast. Once the power hits, and it revs out to 8,500 RPMs. That's right, 8,500. Speaking of 8,500 RPMs and 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds, seems like a good spot. The brakes feel really good as well. So the steering setup is quite a bit different than the previous generation car. While the last one, it was fun, it felt like you had to put too much input into the steering wheel to actually get any angle out of it. This car, they've changed it from 3.5 turns lock to 2.5 turns. So it feels a lot more confident behind the wheel. The actual shape and the feel of the steering wheel itself is also a radical improvement. Now, you don't have any glare issues because the screen is vertical and it's got this little sunshade instead of tilted. We also have two different driving modes. Comfort mode for relaxed around town driving, especially for those who have the automatic version. And then there is Slingshot mode. Now, Slingshot mode is like your sport mode or your track mode, where you've got heightened throttle response, faster shift times, holds the RPMs higher, all the way to that 8,500 sweet spot. This thing loves to be revved. You've also got 2 stages of traction control, which this car, because it only has 1 tire in the back, is so easy to slide. It's absolutely epic. So you've got traction fully on, traction off, and then you've got traction and stability control off. Those are the 3 different settings. Yeah, traction and stability control, probably got to turn that off. Now, we've got a track day later on, so I get to experience this car at its limit on the track, which I'm very excited about. I'm also excited about this helmet. Last night we had this really cool presentation, and this really famous pinstriping artist named Scratch hand-painted this design. I think he did a killer job.
Well, after an epic on-road drive, we have found our way to a racetrack, and it just so happens to be at Bondurant Racing School that I attended a several-day program 3 years ago in Viper ACR. So it's awesome to be back out here. I can't wait to get the car out on the track. And finally, instead of the automated manual, we're gonna be using an actual stick shift on track. So let's see how that compares to the automatic. Honestly though, I am blown away by how much better this car is than its predecessor. It's more comfortable to drive, the brakes feel more confident, the steering, the turn-in is better, it's more stable, the interior is severely improved. Good job, Polaris.
All right, out on track now in the manual Polaris Slingshot. And I gotta say, this is definitely the combination that you want. So we still got a 5-speed gearbox. It's actually pretty similar to the automated manual, only this one you row yourself, the other one uses a hydraulic actuator. But out on the track, let's get some speed, let's get some heat in the tires, some heat in the brakes, and see what this thing is really like to drive. I can't believe we're back out here at Bondurant Raceway. This is awesome. Turn-in is so much better than the previous generation. It's actually crazy. And the braking feel, it's the same brake setup, but the actual feel and confidence of the brakes when you're on them hard is so much better than before. The car feels stable. Woo-hoo-hoo!
Well guys, what a fantastic day that was, driving the new Slingshot on the road and then taking it on track. All of the little gripes I had, especially particularly related to the interior of the previous generation model, have been fixed. And honestly, this is a pretty epic package for the money. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next video.